Hi everyone, and welcome to this recording on how to get started using R Markdown. We covered this in the session, but I noticed that my internet connection actually cut out in some of it. So here's a fresh recording, hopefully with some more detail because I'm not winging it this time. So when you open your RStudio, you want to first open a new file that is an R Markdown file. Your normal R script won't cut it for this. We actually have to open something completely different. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that menu option. And then I'm going to name it something surplus, but I'm sure you would come up with something better. So let's just have a boring test file. And then obviously the author is going to be me because that is who's writing it at the moment, but you could change that to your own name. And then I can choose a default output. Now, HTML is the easiest one to use. PDF starts to get a little bit complicated because you need to install these extra add-ons. However, I've put on a debugging a PDF R Markdown document onto the channel. So you can follow that one to follow the instructions on how to get your PDFs working, hopefully. So for now, I'm going to stick with a HTML document, and I will open that up. And you can see when the document opens, it gives us what we call a YAML header. So this is all the fundamental metadata for the document. We've got our title that we typed in called test file, the author, the date that we created it, which hopefully should be today, and then the type of output we want. And we can modify that a bit more later. Then when you create a new file, the default R Markdown setting is to put all this information in here. And this is just a little bit of information that R Markdown provides to help you get started. You can see here that there's just a description saying this is an R Markdown document, and it carries on describing some things. It also shows you that in these little graded out spaces, separated by the R box and then these apostrophes here, you can see that this is a code section, and then you can see that this here is a main body of text. And because of the color system that I have set up on my RStudio, the colors might look a little different, but there'll be highlights in some of yours as well. So when you get started, you can feel free to delete this. It's not important, it's not going to affect the functioning of your document. And if I was to start a new document, maybe I would think about putting in a heading. And for the headings, then you want to consider that they're delineated by hashtags, and the more the hashtags, the smaller your heading will be. So if I have 2 hashtags, that's kind of just smaller than the main heading, which will appear at the top of your document, which is this one. And then if I did another heading with 3 hashtags, then this would be nested under my previous heading at 8. So I might have something like objectives and overview for the document, and then I'd also have hypotheses for my analysis, and then I could start creating some bullet points. My hypothesis is R Markdown is really helpful, and R Markdown is fun. And they will appear in bullet points. And you can see as well, because I have these titles here, and R Markdown has picked up on that it's actually in the navigation pane, which you can open and close using this button here. I have the titles here and I can jump between them. Obviously it's not moving very much at the moment because there's not much text in the middle, but that's what's happening. And then also to navigate, I can go down here and see what the contents of my document looks like. And then if I wanted to type more plain text, so my objectives, for example, are to show and demonstrate how to get started with R Markdown. That would just be some standard text. Or if I wanted to put a highlight on that, I could do some nifty tricks like bold it by using these key points here, which I'll also provide in an R Markdown cheat sheet. So don't feel obliged to memorize this. Just know that there are cool notations that you'll have to use to change the output of what your text looks like. And then if I wanted to perhaps load some packages, which is a good one to start with, then to start doing some code, I would want to go up here to this menu, and I could easily input some R, but you can see there's some other options here that you could use. So I'm going to click on the R button, and this is equivalent to having your normal R console almost, or your normal R script, and everything that was within this is considered to be R code. So it will behave in the normal way when you have a plain R script. So as I would in a normal R script, I can use the hashtag this time not to make a heading, but within the code box, this means that I'm commenting out some information. So I might say, load the plotting package. And then to have some code, I would put library, which is just loading, as we know, and then I might have ggplot2 there. So this is all code, and if I didn't have the package, I might also want to install the package. So that's not what I would do. And I'd have ggplot2 there. And this might be, I would include this because I'm writing some instructions, for example, for you guys, but I don't necessarily want to run this piece of code every time. So if I didn't want to run something like an installation every time, within these brackets here, you can add some modifiers, which again are on the R Markdown cheat sheet that I'm going to provide you, and you can look up the meanings of them. And also I included them in my own tutorial, which is attached. And I would put eval equals false, and I like to have spaces. And then I would know that this wouldn't be run when I was knitting my document every time, because I don't want to waste my computer power by installing a package that I already have on my own computer. And then if I did want to run something in this line, well, for simplicity's sake, I will insert a new R code box there and put this in. And if I wanted to run it, I have a number of options. I can click Run Current Chunk. Perfect. I could choose from the options here, so I can run the selected line I'm on. I can run the current chunk. I can run the next chunk. I can run all the chunks from below and under this. I can run the whole document. There's all of these options here. And you can see also that it gives you some nifty shortcuts here. So when I tend to do it, if I'm going really fast-paced through my code, I do Control-Alt-N a couple of times, and I manage to go down pretty quickly through several chunks of code. And then if I was to click on the line, as we would before in our normal R script, if I press Control-Enter for a Windows, then I'd run the line as well. So there's a number of options there for you. And then what's really important as well is you have to remember to save your file, because even though we titled it before, I didn't save it. So at the moment I have my working directory just in one of my normal files, and I'm going to save it as a test file. And then I want to keep it as an R Markdown file. And the file ending for that is RMD. So that's all saved. And then every time I make a change, you can see that the color of the text changed here. Again, that will be different depending on the theme you have set up in RStudio. But every time it changes, that means that your changes haven't been saved. RStudio is not going to auto-save it as you're going through like some programs would. So you have to remember to keep clicking these save buttons if you want to commit your changes to your file. So that's wonderful. I'm going to shift across from this file to the one I provided as a template for you guys and go into a few more extra details. So this file is already completed, and I've added a few extra hints here. So again, you'll find information in the tutorial about how to do this, but you can specify the output type of the file, which we talked about a second ago, but you can extend information by telling the document what kind of TOC stands for table of contents. So I've modified some of the parameters here that give me a table of contents when I put together my document as a HTML. Here it just says, yes, I want a table of contents. And here it says I want it to float down the document as I scroll, which is a pretty cool feature, and I'd recommend trying it out if you want to impress your supervisors. And then I've chosen a theme, which is like a color scheme for the main document, and then a highlight, which again modifies something about the colors of the document. And again, you can read more about this in the tutorial if you want to mess around with the colors of your output. It won't change the R Markdown document, but it will change the output file. So just remember that if you're not seeing any colors, it will be when you put together the document at the end that you see the change. So you can see again, I had an objectives, which is a nice way to start your file, and I went through all of this code. I made some data, and then you can see if I close this down, if I run the plot that I have put in this code section, then because I've called it here at the end, I'll get an output instead of in the plots window where we would expect it to come from in our script. You'll actually get an output here in the document that you can preview. And that will be the same of most of the functions that will return something for you when you run them within the document. You'll be able to preview them just under the code section that we're talking about. And you can also maximize them, have a better look, which can be useful for some highly detailed plots. You can close it down, and you can remove it if you're bored of looking at it and you just want to read the rest of the information down here. So that's wonderful. If you personally, sometimes when I run plots in R Markdown and I'm doing an analysis for myself, I find that it's a lot easier for me to actually save and export them as individual files from the plots window. This is a personal thing from me. Some other people might not agree. But if I was to run the name of the plot, which I've called here qplot, and I come it down to my console and rerun it, then you can see that I now have a version here, which I can do all the usual functions from. So I can export it and zoom in and modify all the parameters as usual. But also you can save it by right-clicking within the document. So there's that as well. So that's about it, I think, for getting started. So then we might want to cover some of the functions at the top here. So you can edit some of your options here. When you knit together a document, which is how you combine it into either a HTML or PDF, for example, you would normally get a preview, which RStudio opens for you. And if you want to see these preview, you can change the options here to preview in window, preview in viewer pane, which is on the right-hand side of your screen down here, or no preview if you just simply don't care. So you can mess around with some of the settings of your document here. If you want to find some of the things in your document, you can use the find and replace function here. So if I wanted to, I'm pretty sure I've talked about marmots, as they always do. Help if I could spell it. If I wanted to find the word marmot, I can go through here and find all the places that I referred to marmots. And if I changed my species name, for example, I could replace it with some less worthy animal. And then to finish up, all we want to do is knit our document. In this circumstance, I chose HTML, so we're going to choose HTML again here. And remember that when you do knit it, it's going to automatically save your RMD document. So I had that color change that we talked about earlier where it looks like it's not saved, but it will automatically save when I knit it. So if there's changes that you made that you were a bit nervous about committing to memory, you might want to think about that and go back and change them. So let's try our knitting. You can see in the R Markdown tab it was running there. If it fails to run, you'll get an error at the end and this preview won't appear, and in your directory where you were working, you won't have a file to correspond to this. So you can see this is the preview. This is the table of contents I was talking about. It's very nice, you can click through. So I'd recommend learning how to do that. And if I scroll through, you can see that it's moving along. And then when I talked about the theme, you can see that the color scheme is really completely different from what I had in my original RStudio. And when I'm talking about theme, cerulean, highlight, haddock, the theme is changing all of these colors up here, and the highlight is changing things like in the code. So I can close that down. Oh, one more thing. If you have found something super cool that you want to share with the world, for example, when I'm making my tutorials, I might want to publish the document. This does make it publicly available and anyone with the link can access it. So if it's your private information, maybe don't worry about this part. But for example, I have RPubs set up and I can click on here to publish it. I'm not going to go any further, but just so you know, that's how you would make something publicly visible. And you can see here, there's the warning telling you that it's publicly visible. So reminding you not to share your personal information or sensitive data. Okay, so if I close that down, you might think, okay, where do I find that file again if I want to send it to my supervisors or collaborators? Well, you just go into your normal file explorer if you're on Windows, and you can see that I've been Googling a lot of GIFs here. And then if I go back to last week, this is where I was saving the file, and then my R Markdown tutorial getting started template, which is what this was. There's now a R Markdown file, which is what happens when you click that save button. But also when you knit it, you get this HTML document here. And if I double click on that, it should open in my browser. You can see that my browser's flashing here, and there it is again. So don't worry about losing it, it's all there. Right, I think that's about it. It was a quick overview to R Markdown. Hopefully it helps you get started if you were panicking. There's a bit more information in the resources I provided, and then you can get started expanding with things, messing with some of the arguments and really tailoring things to yourself. There's also a very handy textbook that I provided. So if you want to go through the detail and learn it step by step, which we don't have time for today, that's a really good resource. And remember that the R Markdown developers made a website. So if you Google R Markdown, then the first option that comes up is rmarkdown.rstudio.com. You can find all your resources here that could give you an insight. So here's the overview page. There's a Get Started, I think, which has tutorials in, which are great to follow. There's a gallery which really shows you what's possible, because I didn't really cover that much today. I covered the most simple things, but you can also get more complicated, make interactive documents, which I've included one part of in my tutorial, but you might want to extend it. You can make presentations even if you fancy doing that, and you could write some books. So really the possibilities are very extensive here, and feel free to mess around with it if there's something in particular you're looking for. And then right at the end there's the book. You click on that link and it takes you to a beautiful, very informative resource for anyone interested in using R Markdown. And you can see here that the HTML section in particular is very extensive. So if you want to have a look at that, feel free. Okay, thank you for listening, and that's that for the talk.